The CFPB has saved Americans over $21 billion, and now it's been told to stop work. I'm Judah Z with PandA Law, and we're going to discuss the 5 ways that this stoppage can affect you. Before we discuss the 5 ways that this can affect you, let's discuss a little bit about what the CFPB actually does. So number 1, it enforces all consumer protection laws on the federal level. It handles consumer complaints and helps educate consumers about what their rights are under federal law. So let's highlight some of the major cases that CFPB has won on behalf of Americans. First off, the Lexington Law case. So Lexington Law was charging upfront fees for credit repair. Normally they were charging their clients about $100 a month to monitor the credit and fix it if they found an inaccuracy. Let's be very clear, you should never pay upfront fees for credit repair. The CFPB actually fined them $1.8 billion, and it affected over 4 million people. So that's a huge complaint and action where the CFPB protected you as consumers, first advising you that you should not pay upfront fees for it, but also getting you some refunds of monies that perhaps you paid for Lexington Law services. Other notable CFPB enforcement actions we have in January 2025, the Equifax action for failure to investigate FCRA complaints. So Equifax is a consumer credit reporting bureau, and they have a job to review Fair Credit Reporting Act lawsuits to make sure that what's reporting on your credit is accurate. They were failing to do that. That resulted in a $15 million fine. January 2025, we have another credit reporting bureau, Experian. They were also fined $15 million. In January 2024, Navy Federal Credit Union. It was improperly charging overdraft fees from 2017 to 2022, so for 5 years. In this action, CFPB found that Navy Federal overcharged its clients by $1 billion. $1 billion. Of that $1 billion, $80 million was refunded, and Navy Federal received a $15 million fine from the CFPB. So what is going to be the impact of now the CFPB's work being halted? Well, number 1, there's going to be fewer investigations into wrongdoing. There's going to be less oversight of the financial industry, and potentially fewer settlements or refunds for harmed customers as a result of the CFPB's work. So with the CFPB having to stop work, well, how can everyday Americans seek justice when they're wronged by banking institutions, mortgage lenders, things of that nature? Well, you still have a private right under the FCRA, Fair Credit Reporting Act, FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and other state and federal consumer protection laws. But a right is no good if you don't execute on that right, if you don't enforce it. So oftentimes you're going to need to look for legal help to do so, right? Because we're talking about federal claims, which can be very complex. The beautiful thing about this is when you're an individual plaintiff, you can normally get a better recovery than if you were involved in a class action, where a lot of times just the class action lawyers get paid, or where you have the CFPB enforcing these rights, because as we saw, the CFPB can issue fines. A lot of times that money goes to the government, and the individual consumer that was taken advantage of may not get actual money in their pocket. So here we still have the private right of action that you can have an attorney help you with. One of the most beautiful parts about that is, unlike a lot of work that an attorney may do for you, in these consumer protection cases, lawyers do not charge upfront fees, or at least they shouldn't. They often charge contingency fees, which means we get a piece of any financial penalty or damages we may recover from you. So really, there's no risk of loss for the consumer. You're just gonna have essentially a free attorney, no out-of-pocket costs, unless we get your recovery, and then we'll take a piece of that. So it's a win-win. So let's just apply this scenario to what we saw in the major cases that we reviewed earlier with the CFPB. So in the Lexington Law case, the CFPB recovered $1.8 billion for 4 million people, which equates to about $450 per person. If we were handling this case at PandA Law Firm, our average settlement is somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000 to the client. Now, even if we take a third of that, right, the client is still gonna get thousands of dollars in their pocket versus $450. So you can see there's a monetary advantage, more money in your pocket, using an attorney versus relying upon the CFPB, an attorney like PandA Law. Now, in addition to you having a greater monetary recovery, you also get the benefit of having individualized attention, right? So instead of trying to call the CFPB, seeing what's going on with your case, you can call a lawyer at PandA Law, right? And we'll tell you specifically about what's going on with your case, and we'll give you more of that customer service that you're entitled to. Even if the CFPB disappears tomorrow, your rights have not disappeared. We just have to enforce them, and we should do that through an attorney. So let's just summarize a little bit, talk about what we've talked about so far. Although the CFPB may go away or may stop work, you still have your rights. You should consult an attorney about those. Number two, you do not have to pay and should never pay upfront for credit repair work. That's a big no-no. Attorneys like PandA Law will do it for no out-of-pocket expenses and will get you a bigger recovery on the back end. And then also, please always remember that if you're being harassed by a debt collector, if they're calling your friends or family talking about your debt, if they're calling you too early or too late, if they're calling you more than 7 times in a day, that kind of thing, you still have rights under the FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and once again, no upfront fees for that. And lastly, if you're having overall debt issues, please reach out to a consumer financial protection attorney or a debt relief attorney like PandA Law. We can often use bankruptcy services, debt relief services, settlement services, and the FCRA and FDCPA as a combination to get you the best result to relieve you of debt. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more free tips on how to fix your credit, click the video on the right. If you want to learn tactics on how to defend yourself against debt collectors, please click the video on the left.